Today's speaker is Nick Fish, the president of American Atheists. For more than a decade, American Atheists, he's a relatively new president, has been working on the front lines of the fight to advance equality under the law for all Americans. Nick Fish is a seasoned civil rights and civil liberties activist with more than a decade of political organizing and leadership experience with many of the nation's most prominent political organizing and leadership, political organizations and progressive nonprofits. Before his appointment as president, Nick had served as the development director and the national program director for American Atheists, so he's got quite a history with them. In the last decade, he has represented American Atheists in the media many times, including appearances on Fox News programs, among other things. He's appeared on Hannity, Fox and Friends, and all these wonderful programs to find new audience, because there are people who tune into that who might be receptive to what we're saying. He's been quoted in major newspapers such as the Washington Post, other news sources such as CNN, Time Magazine, Newsweek, and the Associated Press. He's created innovative advocacy and visibility campaigns for American Atheists, including Atheist Voter, and has developed messaging and strategy around the American Atheist legal public policy and their outreach campaigns. So he's been, really the glue behind the organization, and he's here to give us his sort of pep talk in our hour of consternation with the national political environment. So I want to thank you all for coming. Please give a warm welcome to Nick Fish.
Well, thank you everybody for the very warm welcome and for the great conversation as we were getting started. I just want to start out by mentioning that I'll be here as long as needed to have as many conversations with folks as you would like. Our national conference is coming up in Minnesota next week though, so I won't be sticking around for lunch or anything, but I will be happy to hang out as long as folks would like to talk about what's going on, talk about our plans, and take it from there. I just want to thank you all for the hospitality and the welcome and the invitation to be here. I know that for a very long time people had this view that a humanist organization, an atheist organization, there must be this fight. We're humanists, we're not atheists, or they're atheists, they're not humanists, or whatever the case may be. I think that in this current moment, looking around us, recognizing that we are on a precipice, really, looking around at what's happening at the state level in most of this country, but also at the federal level, the ideals that have defined our nation for the past 250 years and that define us as a community are increasingly under threat and are increasingly being rolled back. They are under threat and under attack by a divisive, extreme ideology called white Christian nationalism. This is an ideology that seeks to fuse religious identity with national identity. But it's important to remember that this ideology is not new. It dates back a century or more. But its resurgence and the power that it now wields, the arrival of white Christian nationalism as the dominant political ideology of the administration, is a new thing, and it demands our unwavering and urgent attention. We've seen this ideology recently manifest in chilling, frightening ways. I think many of us saw and watched in horror on January 6th in 2021, watching people carrying Christian flags, explicitly religious symbols, on an attack on our democracy. Having crosses erected on Capitol grounds next to a gallows where they threatened to kill the vice president, himself a devout, very conservative Christian, because he did not cave to their demands. This was, if anything, a potent symbol in a movement full of symbols of the unholy alliance between white supremacy and their version of Christianity and their version of nationalism. State legislatures across the country are enacting, as we speak, draconian anti-abortion bans rooted in a specific religious worldview, bans and attacks on LGBTQ Americans, specifically trans Americans, denying people their fundamental rights and their freedoms, stirring up moral panics by banning books and painting teachers as groomers, indoctrinating our kids and threatening the children. These campaigns are not organic. They are funded and organized by Christian nationalist groups that, again, date back to the earliest days of Jim Crow and before. They are seeking to ban books, threaten teachers, undermine our public education system for daring to challenge a narrow, religiously dominated view of history and society and structures and hierarchies. They're suppressing diverse voices and limiting students' access to knowledge, something that this community, I know, stands in stark opposition to. But it's not just public schools, K through 12, that are seeing the effects of this poisonous ideology. Books about the Holocaust, histories of feminism, civil rights, and racism, even Maya Angelou's autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, were among the 381 titles recently removed from the United States Naval Academy's library this week, after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's office ordered the school to get rid of any book that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion. In addition to Angelou's book, books that were removed included a book entitled Memorializing the Holocaust, Half American, about African American roles in World War II, A Respectable Woman, about the public roles of African American women in the 19th century New York, and Pursuing Trayvon Martin, about the 2012 shooting of the black 17-year-old in Florida that kicked off a movement about police violence. Books that are still on the shelf, though, 2 copies of Mein Kampf, and a book that argues that Black Americans are genetically predisposed to be less intelligent than white Americans. The white Christian nationalist assault on our freedoms and our liberties is multifaceted. We are witnessing not just policy, but also a campaign of terror aimed at silencing dissent. The Trump administration has issued executive orders revoking security clearances and attempting to cancel government contracts with anyone who does business with law firms that previously employed Robert Mueller, Jack Smith, other prosecutors that brought cases against Donald Trump in his personal capacity, or law firms that represent groups like American Atheists or the American Humanist Association, seeking to silence our ability to petition the government. They are attacking the foundations of our legal system. This administration has also moved to target students studying in the US on student visas, students with legal status, for speech that is critical of this administration's policies, taking away the lawful permanent resident status of students, of anyone who engages in speech, for engaging in speech, kidnapping them off the streets and shipping them off to ICE holding facilities in New Orleans and Louisiana, or halfway across the country, or even disappearing people to a foreign concentration camp with little to no recourse. And despite the breakneck pace of this administration's actions, these attempts to install a strongman to implement the white Christian nationalist agenda didn't happen overnight. Their attacks on public education, for example, stretch back decades to the era of Jim Crow. From underfunding and privatization schemes to the promotion of curricula that prioritizes a narrow, religiously informed worldview, these attacks aim to undermine critical thinking, suppress intellectual curiosity, and replace secular education with indoctrination. The white Christian nationalist movement, spearheaded by figures like Leonard Leo and Steve Bannon, continues to exert significant influence on our culture and our politics. Leo, through his vast networks of organizations and his control of massive amounts of dark money, more than $1 billion, has been instrumental in reshaping our nation's judiciary, packing the courts with judges who are sympathetic to their cause. Steve Bannon, with his, we'll call it fiery rhetoric, and his understanding of the power of propaganda, has a network of propaganda outlets behind him. He's mobilized a populist base around a nationalist vision that is deeply intertwined with this particular brand of Christianity. Leo, Bannon, and Stephen Miller, and Project 2025 architect Russell Vaught are just the latest in a series of extremists seeking to implement their radical agenda. This is an agenda that is dramatically out of step with the values of the overwhelming majority of Americans, including us. And that's an important thing to reflect on and repeat here. Their agenda is catastrophically unpopular. It's why Donald Trump disavowed Project 2025 at every attempt throughout the campaign, but is implementing it step by step by step in just the first 2 months of this administration. Our values, the values of a pluralistic, secular democracy, enjoy broad support among the American people. Studies consistently show that a majority of Americans across religious and non-religious lines support the separation of church and state and despise the white Christian nationalist ideology. According to the the Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI, just 10% of Americans are adherents to white Christian nationalism. Now that's still 30 plus million Americans, but it's just 10%. But another 19% are sympathetic to the ideology. But 29% reject it outright, and another 39% are skeptical. Add those numbers up, 70% of Americans, 70%, reject or are skeptical of white Christian nationalist ideology. Yet, despite the widespread support for secularism and pluralism and church-state separation, leaders like Leo and Bannon and Miller and others like them are not concealing their agenda. They have the levers of power right now. This is a smash and grab. Steal anything that's not nailed down, do everything you can to lock in the power that you've got and make it impossible for democracy to flourish, democracy to fight back. They are seeking to dismantle hard-won progress of not just the last 10 years or 20 years, but the last century and a half. They seek to impose a society where a privileged minority rules according to their interpretation of religious law. As Bannon himself has said, their goal is to create, quote, a nation for us. Who is us? White, Christian, heterosexual, native-born men. A nation that reflects their specific religious and cultural identity, leaving no room for those of us who don't conform. And that is, in fact, a core feature of the white Christian nationalist ideology. The notion that there are those ordained by God to rule and those of us who are destined to be ruled. This is a direct assault on the very idea of a pluralistic democracy, where all citizens are equal before the law. And in the face of these profound threats to our rights and the very idea of America, we have to draw strengths from the lessons of the past and the courage of those who came before us. My view is that the civil rights movement provides a powerful example of how ordinary people, armed with nothing but their convictions and a commitment to justice, can overcome seemingly impossible odds. Their struggle and the progress they made toward perfecting our union remains a testament to the power of collective action by values-centered movements of ordinary people, united in a commitment to building the inclusive, pluralistic, secular democracy that our nation aspires to be. That vision for America is an aspirational vision that was laid out in our founding documents. Flawed, incomplete, and imperfect, absolutely. This is a document that contained protections for slavery, remember, an explicit erasure of women. But it was something that was argued over, debated, and fought for by people who were willing to try something that had never been done in the history of mankind. A government by, for, and of the people. A government with no gods, no kings, and no despots ruling over us. And I'm not going to pretend for a single moment that I have all the answers to the profound challenges we're facing today. But from looking at the history of our nation, the history of other nations, and our track record of winning the fight against authoritarians of all stripes, there is no question in my mind that we can and will win this fight again. And it starts with our commitment to secular democracy. The ballot box has been and is our first line of defense. As Thomas Paine once said, quote, "The right of voting for representatives is the primary right by which all other rights are protected." This fundamental principle remains as true today as it was in the 18th century. But we know that we have to vote. I'm not telling you anything you haven't already heard. Atheists and humanists have heard that message loud and clear. Political scientist and religious demographer Ryan Burge has found that atheists, people who self-identify as atheists, are the single most politically engaged religious demographic in America. Quoting him, "The data is clear and unequivocal at this point. No one gets involved in the political process to the level of the average atheist. The group that is most likely to contact a public official, atheists. The group that puts up political signs at the highest rates, atheists. Half of atheists report giving to a candidate or campaign in the 2020 presidential election. And while we don't lead the pack when it comes to attending local meetings, we only trail Hindus." But it comes beyond just our own individual actions, what we are doing with our political time. It means spreading that commitment to engagement for new people, bringing new people into the political process. We have to register new voters, educate our communities, not just this community, but other communities that we're a part of, about the importance of civic participation. And crucially, and this is sort of the first prescription I'm going to give, work tirelessly to ensure that every eligible person has the right to vote and can exercise it. We have to support candidates at every level of government who understand and respect our commitment to secular pluralistic democracy, our commitment to allowing everyone to have a voice. But our engagement can't just start and end on election day. We have to hold our elected officials accountable. We have to lobby them for policies that we want, advocate for policies that will improve our democracy and promote that pluralism we desire, and challenge them. Challenge them when they try to impose laws that undermine our commitment to pluralism or promote a particular religious worldview or clamp down in some way on that democracy. We have to be vigilant, persistent, and unwavering in our demands that our government serves all citizens and not just a privileged few. The civil rights movement, again, provides a powerful example of how sustained political engagement can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Through decades, and this is the time frame we're talking about here. This is not a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year commitment. This is decades. Decades of organizing, marching, lobbying. Activists forced our nation to confront its deep-seated racism and enact landmark legislation, such as the Civil Rights Act or the Voting Rights Act. These victories were not gifts from the political class. They were the result of tireless efforts and unwavering commitment to the democratic process. And think about that word, the democratic process. Think about that phrase. It's not just voting. It's not just sending a letter every so often. It is a process. It is a slog. It is difficult, and it takes decades. Right now, look to the grassroots movements that have sprung up across the country to defend, reproductive rights. Protests, yes, but also mutual aid groups and informal networks aimed at helping people get the care they need across state lines. These movements are powered by ordinary people, and they are a testament to the power of political engagement. For too long, our community has viewed political engagement as some sort of getting our hands dirty. Oh, we have to be above that. We have to just debate things and have these arguments and philosophize. No. We have to be out on the streets, protesting, organizing, in meeting rooms, in government meetings, every single day. It's hard, and it takes time. But all of this is a reminder, looking back on history, looking at what's happening right now, that when we organize, when we mobilize, we can push back against even the most determined, well-funded attacks on our freedoms. Just the other week, more than 3.5 million Americans marched in the streets to protest the abuses of this administration. My mother, my 74-year-old mother, attended a protest at the state capitol in Lansing, Michigan. She's joined the League of Women Voters. She is working every single day on League of Women Voters things. She sent me news about a lawsuit that the League of Women Voters has filed against the Trump administration. My mother is becoming radicalized in a good way. This is the first time, this last week was the first time she attended a protest in more than 50 years. And she said to me, "I'm so glad I went. I hadn't ever done it. I don't remember the last time I went, but I'm glad I did it. I had to do something." The question is whether we can keep up this level of engagement in the months and years to come. And again, yes, years. Are we prepared to march and protest and stage sit-ins and direct action, organize boycotts, and yes, when it comes to it, risk arrest or threats of violence from the other side to protect our rights and the rights of the most vulnerable? Because we better be, because that's what's coming. That's what it's going to take. The other side has made no secret of their willingness to use violence and intimidation and threats against us and against the people we care for. So that's my first call to action. Our engagement in the political process is vital. Yes, but it has to also be coupled with a strong defense of the institutions that safeguard our democracy and help us build a better pathway forward. So our civic institutions, those are the bedrocks of our democracy. It's not just the hypothetical, it's the very real. They are places where we can come together across lines of faith and politics, background and income, to debate, to build a common future. These institutions are not just buildings or bureaucracies, they are the living embodiment of our shared values and aspirations. James Madison understood this deeply as well. He believed that a healthy republic depended on an educated and engaged citizenry. He wrote extensively about the importance of civic virtue, as he called it, and the need for institutions that could foster it. Madison recognized that democracy was not self-sustaining. The United States is not a beautiful special snowflake that is just going to carry on forever. It requires active participation and informed judgment of our citizens. In 1822, Madison wrote in a letter, quote, "Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives." Perhaps that's why libraries, public schools, higher education, and academics are often the first targets of authoritarian regimes. We've seen that indeed play out in our own homegrown authoritarian movement. Libraries have historically served as sanctuaries for knowledge and free expression. And right now, they're on the front lines of the battle against censorship and book bans. Public schools are the great equalizer of our society, providing opportunities for young people from all walks of life across, again, religious, ethnic, racial, and economic lines to learn together and to be together, to meet people who are different from them, but to do something together. Higher education, our colleges and universities are, frankly, the envy of the world. Great job, us. Students from every corner of the globe come here to the US to learn, to debate, to study, to innovate. But this administration has made the project of bringing academia to heel a priority. They've threatened students and professors alike, detained them on the border just to release them a week later, confiscated their phones, or turned people away because of their social media profiles. They're threatening anyone who speaks out with deportation, imprisonment, or worse. But these aren't the only institutions that are under attack by this administration. The independent judiciary and the media are targets as well. This administration has time and time again ignored court rulings that they don't like, threatened journalists who report things that they're doing. But these institutions are essential checks on the power of an executive. And they're often the early targets of that executive that seeks to undermine democracy. We've seen in recent years an unprecedented assault on the integrity of the press, with journalists labeled as enemies of the people. Sound familiar? And their work dismissed as fake news. We've seen lawsuits filed that threaten them and try to silence them. The courts and the press, especially now, are, yes, imperfect vehicles to protect our democracy. The authoritarian white Christian nationalist movement, led by Leonard Leo, made it a priority to remake both over the past several decades. They've, unfortunately, largely succeeded. And the fact that this second Trump administration is still facing the level of pushback that they are, again, an imperfect amount of pushback, but they are still facing it, from both of these avenues, from the judiciary and from the media, is yet another indication of the level of extremism at play by this administration. Our corporate media, yes, is obsessed with horse race coverage, preserving access to the halls of power and maintaining a sort of faux neutrality, both sidesism. And that can certainly be said to be part of the problem. But to use a phrase that's often attributed to Thomas Jefferson, but more likely was said by Ralph Nader, information is the currency of a democracy. A free and independent press is not a luxury, it's a necessity. An independent judiciary and the rule of law are not luxuries or inconveniences, they're necessities. But lastly, beyond formal institutions are the informal ones, civic and community groups, like the ones that many of us belong to, where we can find space to simply be ourselves. Our sewing groups, our book clubs, whatever the case may be. These are vital hubs for engagement, for dialogue, for breaking down the walls that we too often put up around ourselves. They provide space for communities to organize, to mobilize, to address local needs, to foster a sense of belonging and shared purpose. This is the role that churches once served for many more Americans than it now does. And while you certainly won't hear me, the president of American Atheists, arguing for the necessity of revitalizing churches in America, building community is a core part of this equation, a core part for our ability to stand up to rising authoritarianism. Churches have a few hundred-year head start on us as a secular community, but that doesn't mean atheists and humanists aren't able to fill the gap. Just look at what some of the vibrant, amazing communities in our own sphere are doing every single day. Karaoke nights, sewing and book clubs, setting up a food pantry, free to anyone who needs it. Ceremonies celebrating important life milestones, or simply supporting each other through difficult times by, again, I'm from the Midwest, bringing a casserole. Probably would be covered in potatoes and mayonnaise, but that's fine. The civil rights movement also relied heavily on civic institutions to advance their cause, formal and informal. Black churches served as organizing centers, providing safe spaces for activists to meet, to plan, and mobilize. It's why you're seeing this administration explicitly target churches, going into churches to try to deport people or break up meetings. Black colleges and universities played a crucial role in educating and training the next generation of leaders. It's why you're seeing HBCUs and other universities being attacked. And organizations like the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference provided legal support, advocacy, and strategic direction. It's why you're seeing this administration attacking law firms and nonprofits. These institutions were essential for sustaining the movement in the face of violent repression and government hostility. All of these institutions relied on one another, leaning on each other, in the fight to protect our rights and to perfect our union. And that is why they are the first to be targeted. So support your local library, attend a school board meeting, get involved in a community organization, write a letter to the editor, become a supporter of a nonprofit news outlet, become a supporter of a nonprofit advocacy organization. Our civic institutions are the lifeblood of our democracy, period. And they need our support right now more than ever. We have to be active participants, not just in the formal political process, but in these institutions, building them and sustaining them, ensuring that they remain vibrant, inclusive, and committed to serving the common good, and don't simply bow down to this administration or anyone who seeks to tear them down. All of these institutions share one thing in common. They bring together people from all walks of life who share one or two common commitments. But that is only possible if we choose to engage and share our stories. We have those shared values and shared commitments, but some people don't know that yet. So that's why I am going to also advocate for an increased commitment to building partnerships, getting out there. The challenges we face right now are too great for us as a secular community to tackle alone. We have to build bridges with others who share our commitment to pluralism, to secular democracy, to inclusivity, even if we disagree with them on other issues. This is not about compromising our values or compromising our core identity as atheists or humanists. This is about finding common ground, speaking in the language of values that so many other Americans share with us. It's about recognizing that we are in this together and that our shared commitments are far more important than the differences that we have. The spirit of collaboration has been a hallmark of every successful social movement throughout history. The civil rights movement, for example, was a coalition of diverse groups, different churches, black churches, white churches, mainline Protestants, evangelicals, but also Jewish synagogues, atheist and humanist groups, labor unions, student organizations, white allies. There were atheists and humanists, Jews and Catholics, black, white, Hispanic, all united in a cause and willing to challenge and stand up against the Jim Crow South government head on, often at great personal risk. There's story after story after story, heartbreaking stories where people traveled to the South to fight Jim Crow and were run out of town, kidnapped, beaten, and even killed. These groups often had different priorities, tactics, different messaging, different approach. Heck, they wore different clothes to the protests. But they were united in their opposition to segregation and their demand for equal rights. This nation was also founded on that level of collaboration. Let's go back even further. Let's look at the American Revolution. The founders, despite their different backgrounds and beliefs, united for a common cause, once again, to secure independence from a tyrant and establish a government based on the consent of the governed. John Adams was a devout Christian, and he worked alongside Thomas Jefferson, who was so skeptical of organized religion, he cut verses out of the Bible. They also worked with Benjamin Franklin, a deist. They disagreed on many things, but they agreed on the fundamental principles of liberty and self-government. This ability to forge alliances, to find common ground in the face of a common enemy, is a lesson we have to learn from today. We have to seek out partnerships within the secular community, obviously. The American Humanist Association and American Atheists, the Freedom from Religion Foundation and the Secular Coalition, the Secular Student Alliance and the American Ethical Union, all of us have to work together, and we are. But it can't end there. It has to extend further. It has to extend to religious groups that embrace pluralism and with community organizations that are working to build a more just and inclusive society. That is going to require all of us to step outside of our comfort zones, to confront sometimes our painful past with religion. Some of us have had painful experiences with religious groups. I'm not going to ask you to set aside or forget that, but what I am going to ask you to do is work within your capacity where you can. Or if you're someone who, like me, didn't come from a high control religious group, maybe we're the ones to lead on some of these things, so the folks who did have a more traumatic experience leaving religion or with religion aren't asked to carry that burden. We can find creative solutions that respect our differences between us as humanists and religious groups as religious groups. But we can do that while advancing our shared goals. This interfaith dialogue is crucial. Faith groups are among those standing up right now to the Trump administration's worst excesses, particularly as they relate to refugees and immigration. At a conversation as we were getting started about our nation's immigration policies and what we could change, I think there's a lot we can change. But religious groups are often the ones that have the resources and the infrastructure to do the on-the-ground work for refugees, for people who are coming to this country seeking to be embraced by the tremendous rights that we have, the values that we have as Americans. This common ground to be found here is not in faith, however, it's in values. And I think that's an important way to frame this. Those values include things like our commitment to bold action in the face of this threat, to pluralism, I keep harping on this, to inclusivity, to looking toward the future to build a better future for not just ourselves, but those who come after us. These are values, again, that are shared by an overwhelming majority of Americans, including the 65-70% of Americans who are religious. These values can be a source of unity rather than the division that too often comes from religion. Many faith traditions share our commitment to justice, to compassion, to human dignity, and we can build powerful alliances with those who are willing to stand up in defense of these values. So, my next challenge to you: reach out to someone from a different background. Attend an interfaith event. Join a coalition working together for justice. Build bridges of understanding and cooperation. Our future, the future of this nation, depends on our ability to work together. We have to be bridge builders and coalition builders, peacemakers, forging alliances that can overcome the forces of division and hate. These partnerships, rooted in a shared commitment to our value, provide a powerful foundation for us to be outspoken about what unites us rather than what divides us. And in the face of an extreme, divisive ideology of white Christian nationalism, silence on this is not an option. We have to be clear, we have to be confident, and we have to be unwavering in our defense of the values that underpin a pluralistic democracy. These values are not merely abstract principles or concepts. They are the foundations that guarantee our freedom, our equality, and our dignity. We must defend the separation of church and state, not just as a matter of law, but as a fundamental principle of justice. We must insist on religious freedom for all, not just for some. Religious freedom is not a privilege to be granted or revoked at the whim of the majority. It is an unalienable right that belongs to every individual. We must protect the rights of religious minorities, non-believers, and those who hold, yes, unorthodox and unpopular beliefs. We must demand equality for all, regardless of their faith, their gender, their sexual orientation, their gender identity, or the color of their skin. Equality is not some utopian ideal. It is a fundamental right enshrined in our Constitution and in international human rights law that has to be fought for. We have to fight against all forms of discrimination and prejudice, ensure that everyone has the opportunity to thrive and participate fully in our society. And we have to see how all of these rights are interconnected and how the white Christian nationalist movement seeks to divide us and turn us against one another. They want us to see the world as they see it, as a zero-sum game where the gains made by some must necessarily come at the expense of another. We reject that cynical notion. We see example after example of growing the civil rights of all and supporting each other through that growth. We see the importance right now of speaking truth to power, of sharing the stories of our community, the very real impact of our work, and the devastating effects of the white Christian nationalist agenda put into practice. There's a very painful example that I know folks probably saw in the news that really brings this home, where someone in a state with a complete abortion ban is having a miscarriage. And in order to get the treatment that she needs, she has to have an abortion. This is a wanted pregnancy. But her state, because of the laws they've passed, has made it impossible for doctors to perform the procedure that she needs until she is about to die. Bleeding out, sitting in a parking lot, bleeding out, waiting until she is sick enough to get the care that she needs. Those are the very real examples that we have to highlight. It's not exploitative, it's not distortion. It is a very real example of this ideology put into practice. During the civil rights era, again turning back to that, activists refused to be silenced in the face of brutal repression, state violence, police with billy clubs, dogs. They spoke out against injustice, organized protests, marched, demanded that our nation live up to its ideals. Their courage and the eloquence of their statements inspired millions, and still does today. You said at the beginning that we don't just turn to the supposed wisdom of those long gone, but we don't ignore it either. Their words, their actions, their example help galvanize the moment for change. We are in such a moment today. We have to lift up the stories of the people that are already being victimized by this regime. That means, in this moment, for example, sharing the words of Mahmoud Khalil, the legal permanent resident and recent Columbia graduate who was kidnapped off the street by ICE agents because of his advocacy at Columbia. Quote, "Who has the right to have rights? It is certainly not the humans crowded into the cells here. It isn't the Senegalese man I met who has been deprived of his liberty for a year, his legal situation in limbo, and his family an ocean away. It isn't the 21-year-old detainee I met who stepped foot in this country at age 9, only to be deported without so much as a hearing. Justice escapes the contours of this nation's immigration facilities." He continued on, "Students have long been at the forefront of change, leading the charge against the Vietnam War, standing on the front lines of the civil rights movement, and driving the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. Today, too, even if the public has yet to fully grasp it, it is students who steer us toward truth and justice." End quote. We have to be willing to speak out against intolerance and discrimination wherever we see it. And that includes within our own communities, within our own community. When we hear hateful, divisive rhetoric, we have to challenge it. When we see injustice, we have to confront it. When we encounter those who seek to divide us, we have to stand united. Silence in the face of oppression is complicity. We cannot sit idly by while the rights of our fellow Americans, including those who are new to our country, are being trampled upon. Storytelling and personal narratives can be powerful tools in this fight. By sharing our own experiences and the experiences of those who've been marginalized, we can put a human face on the struggle to perfect our union. We can show that this is not just about abstract principles and the law, it's about real people with real lives and real hopes and real dreams. It's up to us to be courageous advocates for the things we believe in. Our voices matter, more so than you can believe. Our actions matter. Our commitment to this work matters. We must be the voices of conscience, the defenders of justice, and the champions of freedom. So to start wrapping up here, we all know the threat to religious nationalism is real, and it's urgent. But we are not powerless. We have the tools, the resources, and the passion to defend our democracy. Now, we don't have the resources of billionaires backing us, $1.5 billion sitting in a slush fund. I wish we did. If you know someone, please have them give me a call. But we do have the legacy of past movements to guide us, the wisdom of past leaders to inspire us, and the strength of our communities to sustain us. In this fight, we have to embrace a multifaceted approach, just like the opposition is engaging in a multifaceted attack on our rights. As I've said, we have to increase our political engagement. While atheists are already more likely than not to be registered to vote and to be highly engaged, those are just the first steps. They aren't enough. We have to translate our values into concrete action by supporting candidates, by lobbying for policies that protect church-state separation and protect our values, and by working to counter the poisonous influence of Christian nationalist groups in the political arena. Secondly, we have to vigorously defend and build better civic institutions. Libraries, schools, academia, and a free press are essential for fostering an informed and engaged citizenry. We must be active participants in these institutions, ensuring that they remain vibrant, inclusive, and committed to serving the common good. Third, we have to build bridges with unlikely allies. We have to seek out partnerships with religious organizations that embrace the pluralism we want to see, and with community groups that are working to build a better society. That requires us to step outside our comfort zones, as I said, to engage in difficult dialogue and have very frank conversations sometimes, and agree to let things lie for a moment while we confront the dangers that we have to in this moment. We have to find those creative solutions that respect our differences while advancing our shared goals. And finally, we have to be outspoken about the values that define us. We have to defend that separation of church and state, yes, but also insist on religious freedom for all. Demand equality for all, regardless of their faith, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their race, regardless of anything else that people could use to divide us. Our founders fought a revolution to establish a nation rooted in that equality. Imperfect and incomplete, yes, but an aspiration worth fighting for, and a fight that is constantly being undertaken, a perfect union that is constantly being perfected. They understood that true freedom meant freedom of conscience, freedom of thought, freedom from tyranny. They enshrined these principles in our Constitution, again, not as a gift, but as a birthright. This birthright was not easily won, any more than the birthrights now of the civil rights era. It was purchased with blood, sweat, and tears of generations of patriots who dared to dream for a more perfect union. Now it is our turn to once again defend that birthright. It is our turn to ensure that the promise of America remains a reality and a possibility for all. We have to rise to this moment with the same courage and determination and unwavering commitment that defined the civil rights movement and the revolution itself. To quote Lincoln, we must be the ones that to ensure that in the face of an authoritarian movement, Government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. So, let's leave here today and moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose and a firm commitment to action. The future of our democracy depends on it. The time to act is now. The time to lead is now. For our community, as a community of values, to lead is right now. The time to make our voices heard as a community of values is now. Just because there isn't a higher power, it doesn't mean there isn't a higher calling. We are facing the greatest threat to our freedoms in a generation. We are being called to stand up to that threat. And I, for one, will be answering that call. And I hope that you will too. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions if that's what you're going to say.
Yep.